Welcome to Speedrunner Reviews. In this series I'll be analysing games using the mindset of speedrunning. This video will look at the game from three perspectives. First, the casual experience, which is how most people will first play the game. Next we'll discuss the speedrun experience, including all the interesting tech and how well the game holds up as a speed game. Finally, we'll look at the tool-assisted speedrun, showing what the game looks like when pushed to the theoretical limit. If you already know the game and want to jump straight to the speedrun part, I've left timestamps in the description. Today we're looking at Fantasy Zone, which was released on multiple systems, but we're going to be looking at the Master System and both NES versions of the game today. Yeah, it's a bit weird, but the NES version had this version, which was called the Tenjin version. And the NES version also had this one, which is normally called the Sunsoft version or the Japanese version. And of course we also have the Master System version. I'll be talking mainly about the NES Sunsoft version and the Master System version in this video, mainly because the strats differ between those two quite a bit and both are worth talking about. The Tenjin version is a bit choppy and annoying to play, although it still would have some interesting tech tied to it. Before we get stuck into it, if you end up enjoying this video, please consider subscribing to keep up to date. I will have more videos like this coming out regularly and subscriptions help out the channel a lot. So between all versions of the game, the core mechanics remain the same. You're starting off in a normal level and then you've got these enemy bases that you have to destroy. Once you destroy all the enemy bases, you get to fight the boss of the level. So you have your normal shot and you also have the little bomb landmine kind of things that you can use. And if you combine both of those, then you're going to get very powerful attack output. You can also go to the shop and buy various upgrades, so you want to be collecting gold throughout the playthrough. Once you've beaten all the bases for the level, the boss appears, and usually the boss has a weak spot. Like this guy, for example, the weak spot's just his mouth, and it indicates when you're about to beat the boss because the colour changes. Once you beat the boss, you get a big money payout, and then you can use that to buy upgrades in the next level. The upgrades vary. There's a few different bits and pieces you can get. You can get faster movement speed, you can get better shots, or you can get upgraded bombs. Usually that faster movement speed is a good idea because that persists. If you buy something like the 7-way shot in this level, you'll see a timer up the top. It's only got 5 seconds left, so unless you're facing a particularly tricky section of the game, it's usually not worth doing that. On the Master System version, there is a cool way to get those gun upgrades to last for longer, and that's if you buy all the speed upgrades and then buy a gun upgrade. For some reason, that just makes it unlimited time that it lasts for. Pretty useful strategy if you're trying to play through this game. And the NES version pretty much follows the same formula. Some of the upgrades are a little bit different and just different strategies developed because of that kind of stuff, but at heart it's essentially the same game. One thing that's really cool about this game is that it's a shooter but not an auto-scroller, so it actually makes it possible to speedrun, and it makes the speedrun pretty interesting. Normally these types of games aren't very good for speedrunning or tazzing just because it takes the same amount of time to beat them each time, unless you're looking at something like the Gradius Taz, which has a lot of play around in it. It's also a pretty short game, so you're able to get through a speedrun pretty quickly. I will stress though, this game is incredibly hard casually. I don't know if I'm just bad at mashing or dodging bullets or something, but I was never really able to beat it normally. I can these days, but it still is a pretty big challenge. Speaking of challenge, I will talk about the end section of the game shortly, so if you want to avoid spoilers, you might want to skip forward about a minute or two to the speedrunning section here. So eventually you're going to get to the end of the normal levels, and these are pretty reasonable to get through actually. They're not overly difficult. The part where the game gets really tricky is where you get to the end of the game and you have to do a boss rush. So essentially you have to beat all the bosses in a row and then beat this hectic final boss. Generally the strategy, especially on the Master System version, is to get a bunch of heavy bombs. Heavy bombs will essentially kill the bosses in one hit. What you do is you go over the bosses and you drop it, and it drops from the top of the screen. I'm not using heavy bombs yet because I've still got the 7-way shot, but you'll see with the later bosses here, I'm going to be using heavy bombs quite a bit more. So you got this boss here which usually takes ages to kill, but you can just go under it and drop a heavy bomb. Pretty great strategy. Of course, if you don't know that strategy, it's going to be very difficult to play through this. In fact, where the game really ramps up in difficulty is the last boss, which we'll see in a second here. The last boss is essentially, well, it looks like a big version of you, and it has these little snake things that come out and chase you. They're pretty easy to beat first of all, but the snakes get like faster and faster, and if they do hit you, it's a one-hit kill. So we'll see that happening in a second. You'll see the bullets fired normally for the first few snakes, and then you got to use heavy bombs on the last few. You really do need that speed upgrade to be able to get these, and also a couple heavy bombs. If you just cheese it with heavy bombs, it's usually fine, but it is pretty tricky. In fact, if you wanted to do a no upgrade run, it's usually pretty good until you get to this part. You're not going to have a lot of luck beating this boss without upgrades. You at least need the speed upgrade to get out of the way of it quickly. Once you beat the boss, you get the awesome text scroll for the end of this game. This game has some really deep lore, talking, was the victory really worth the price I had to pay? So yeah, I don't know, I just really love that this game ends with just this absolutely deep story, and it was just some random shooter throughout the whole game. I think it turns out that that big version of you was supposed to be your father, and your father was the chief of the enemy forces who you were fighting, so yeah, it's pretty deep. Now this game was so popular that Oppa Oppa essentially became the mascot for Sega for a little while. So Oppa Oppa was one of the first mascots, and then it became Alex Kidd when Alex Kidd came out, and then of course it became Sonic who was the mascot. But Oppa Oppa was that original one. In fact, Oppa Oppa had a whole bunch of cameos in Sega games. For example, Tom and Jerry, where you can see Oppa Oppa right next to Sonic on the posters there. Oppa Oppa was unlockable in Sega and Sonic All-Stars Racing. And most importantly, in Arnold Palmer Golf, there was a secret Fantasy Zone minigame. Who would have thought? In fact, Oppa Oppa also went on to star in a few different sequels. Most of these are just direct sequels to Fantasy Zone, with some mix-ups like Fantasy Zone The Maze, for example. So regardless of which version you play, I think this game is definitely worth a go. I find it a little bit easier with an auto-fire controller, but that's because I'm pretty bad at mashing. But if you're used to sort of these shooter games, you should be able to get through the whole thing with fairly minimal trouble. Just remember to look at all the shops and buy all the upgrades that are actually necessary. And usually if you have a bit of speed and maybe an extra gun upgrade, you should be mostly fine. Those heavy bombs are really useful for those bosses, which are hard to kill. Alright, now we're going to look at the speedrun for Fantasy Zone. This is the page for the Master System version, and they do also have the NES version on speedrun.com, but you can see there's a lot less players for this. Also, unfortunately, this is only the Tenjin version, which, as I said, is a bit choppier and kind of less fun to play. So I'll be focusing mainly on the Master System version for this section of the video. The category is broken up into any percent and any percent turbo, which I very much appreciate as a terrible button masher. I suspect part of the reason turbo was allowed is because it looks like you might be able to use that on Wii VC. But given that the any percent record is actually faster than the turbo record, we'll just look at this 437 today. So the world record we're looking at today is the 437 by Red Pepper. Red Pepper's a pretty good runner who does a lot of work with Punch-Out and Sonic among a whole bunch of other Sega games. I'd highly recommend dropping them a sub if you haven't already. In fact, if you just look at the hand cam, you'll see the absolutely insane mashing right off the bat. The faster you mash, the faster those enemies die, so you gotta do it quickly. Now, Red Pepper starts off the run by getting a whole bunch of money and then doing a shopping trip. There's a bit of RNG here, but usually it's fairly predictable what you get. You can see he could have gone into the shop earlier, but chooses to wait a little bit. You get the big wings, the jet engine, and the 7-way shop. You'll also notice Red Pepper has no money left after that trip. And the reason for that is if you buy something and then have no money left, the game goes, oh, okay, you can't buy anything more, and it kicks you out of the shop. It actually saves you moving the cursor all the way to the shop exit button and saves you a whole bunch of time. For that same reason, you'll see here that when the boss drops a lot of gold, Red Pepper actually only grabs a very particular amount, and that's with all the shop routing. You want to route it out so that you have 0 money left right at the end of the shop trips, and that saves you time every time you do a shop trip. You can see that 7-way shot being extremely useful there, because, well, it's 7 bullets rather than 2 bullets, so it kills the enemies a lot quicker. Especially if you get right up in the enemy's face and shoot that 7-way shot, it's very, very efficient. One thing that I will mention about this game is that the cost of upgrades does scale up, so every time you buy the 7-way shot, it's going to cost more to buy it again the next time. But that being said, you get a lot more money later on in the game, so it's not really a huge deal. Red Pepper's sort of just going through here with heavy bombs and 7-way shot. Now the downside of heavy bombs is that you can't use your normal bombs while you have them. So normal bombs would normally let you kill things a little bit quicker, but with those heavy bombs you have the one-hit kills, but you can only use it the one time. You can't really use your normal bombs. You can see how effective that firebomb is there because all the enemies are at the same height. And if you sort of follow the firebomb throughout the screen, you can have it kill all the enemies on this map very quickly. I can't stress enough how impressive this money routing is. You would get used to it after a little while playing, but you have to be so careful not to get the wrong amount of money. Right there, for example, if Red Pepper had slightly less money, that shop trip would have been faster because he would have got kicked out. But doing it on every single shop trip wouldn't be that reasonable. You want to make sure you do have at least enough money to do it. And since you're getting money in such large increments, it could be hard to plan out hitting 0. Now this level here is going to show expert use of the firebomb. You'll see that fireball sort of travelling left, and Red Pepper's has it at a particular height so that it'll kill multiple enemies at once. The fireballs are a one-hit kill. It's just really hard to actually manage it and make that one-hit kill work when you're using them. And you'll see in this next level that Red Pepper drops the firebomb at a very particular height so that it kills basically all the enemies with that one firebomb. And that saves actually having to do much shooting at all. Now obviously it would be a bit quicker to use heavy bombs and just sort of zoom through and heavy bomb everything. But realistically, if you want to buy that many heavy bombs, they're going to scale up in price, and also they're going to take more and more shop trips. Whereas with a firebomb, you can just buy that one and kill all the enemies on the screen. This boss here is always really frustrating because it sort of goes invincible while it's broken apart, so you just have to be patient with that. But the 7-way shot of course makes it a lot quicker. Red Pepper comes into the final boss, and you can see that Red Pepper has all the upgrades, so all sort of the different speed upgrades, and that means that the 7-way shot is going to last forever in this boss fight. So realistically, you want to use heavy bombs when you need to kill the bosses quickly, but if you can kill them with the 7-way shot fairly quickly, you might as well do that. You only get 9 heavy bombs, and that's not enough to kill all the bosses, so you do have to plan out when you're going to use that 7-way shot, and just be really careful about it here. But with most of these bosses that only have one hitbox and it's a one-hit kill, that heavy bomb is a really good idea to use. You can take this boss for example with the little snowmen. You wouldn't want to use a heavy bomb on here because you're waiting for them to come on screen anyway. And then that big one comes on screen eventually and you can just kill it pretty quickly. Using the heavy bomb here wouldn't really speed up the fight at all. And this boss is really frustrating because it takes a long time for its hitbox to become active too. Use a heavy bomb on the turtle there. And then we have the last normal boss from the game, which is this dude who sort of goes invincible and then not invincible for a little while. Heavy bombs don't really do a lot of damage to this guy. It doesn't kill him in one hit, so you do have to use that 7-way shot there. And luckily Red Pepper's done that engine purchase strategy to make the heavy bomb, the 7-way shot last forever. Otherwise it would be really difficult to do this. But some really impressive mashing on the 7-way shot there, and then some heavy bombs to finish off that boss quickly. I can't stress enough, if you don't kill that boss quickly, the snakes just come out and kill you pretty much straight away. So Red Pepper gets the absolutely epic lore at the end of the game, and then that's the run done. A very impressive performance. It looks like this may have been a new route that Red Pepper was using and then PB'd by 38 seconds, so it would be really interesting to see what the difference would be like, how much more optimized this new route could get, because this looks like it was one of Red Pepper's first runs, although there's not many obvious mistakes in it, so it is pretty impressive that they were able to pull it off so quickly. Now we're going to move on to the TAS portion of the video, so I will talk about both the NES and the Master System version in this section. So we got the NES version here, and then we got the Master System version here. The NES version is that little bit slower, but the Master System version uses a special glitch to make it quicker. We'll talk about the NES version first. So we'll look at this NES TAS in 357, and this TAS was done using sort of that Sunsoft / Japanese version. You can see here with the firing rate and sort of using the bombs strategically to beat the enemies. That's just going to be the strategy throughout the TAS. Now if you played this version, the Master System version versus the Tengen version, they'll feel pretty similar on the surface, but there's actually a lot of differences. One of the weirdest things about this version is that after you fire a bullet, your trajectory still impacts where that bullet goes. So if you fire a bullet and then move down, the bullets will come down with you after firing. It's so bizarre, but that's just the way it works. So when you go to shoot an enemy, you've got to line up to shoot the enemy, but then you also can't move after you fire the bullet, otherwise you might move the bullet up or down and have it miss the enemy. I assume that's to make all your bullets sort of look like they're going in a straight line, rather than to look like they're sort of choppy and going up and down. The other difference comes in fire rate, and it's best shown in this first bit of the TAS. So you'll see that I go left and then just shoot a whole bunch. And that's just to hit that enemy there, and then I'm bombing to the right. So on the Master System version, you're limited to sort of 3 bullets on screen at any one time, whereas on this NES version, you're limited to a shot every 5 frames. So in theory, you could just shoot as much as you want, and you don't have to do that thing where if you fire a bullet, you have to wait for it to leave the screen before you can fire another one. It's just limited to that. So in a sense, the NES version is better for longer range attacks because you can just keep firing without having to slow down. Whereas when you get shorter, it's frustrating because you then have to wait for longer to do your shots to hit the enemy. Whereas a Master System version, it's going to be much better to get up in the enemy's face with the 7-way shot and just hit like 7 shot, 7 shot, 7 shot over and over. And you want all those shots to despawn really quickly because you can't fire more bullets until those 7 shots are gone from the screen, unlike the NES version. It's just amazing that how similar the games are on the surface. They're just so much different under the hood. And the other thing about this version is that the laser beam is just a lot better in the NES version for some reason. So I'll be using the laser beam pretty heavily throughout the run, although we do use the 7-way shot a little bit later. The other difference you'll notice is the 7-way shot recharge. So if you have a look on the bottom right, that's got about 4 seconds left. And then when you come into the new level, it's going to refresh and have the 15 seconds left again. That means that if you are able to beat the levels in under 15 seconds, you can just keep the 7-way shot through. And that happens in most levels here. You see here the 7-way shot won't run out, and I'll get it back again in the next level. But if the level does take a little bit too long, you're going to lose that 7-way shot. So that's one of the things that makes TAS so much faster than RTA for this game, is you can squeeze out and just keep that 7-way shot throughout the run. On the Master System version, that doesn't happen, although the Master System version does have the glitch where you can get all the engine upgrades and just keep the 7-way shot forever. That just takes a lot of money to do, of course. We do see very similar items used here. For example, the firebomb, you can just strategically use that, but it moves a little bit faster in this version, so it's often harder to hit multiple enemies at once with it. It's also really strange, this boss here isn't really in the Master System version, so ports back in those days didn't really work how ports do in these days. So they just reprogram the game, and sometimes they had different bosses or, slightly changed bosses. Just why not? Now there's going to be some shop buying strategy here. You'll notice that I buy fire bombs and heavy bombs at the start of this next level. Now you can only have one equipped at a time, and to equip a different one you have to go to a shop again. So it seems a bit weird that I do that, and I select the fire bombs here. The reason is that when I buy the fire bombs, I'm already scrolled to the right of the shop, so that when we have the heavy bombs there, I wouldn't have to go back and buy them again. So you'll notice when I get into the shop here before the boss rush, I won't need to scroll all the way to the end of the shop there. All I'll do is just exit and equip those heavy bombs that I bought before. So it's those tiny little optimizations that make the TAS pretty quick. We also have the laser here for this boss rush, and that's going to save a whole bunch of time. I also have a lot of fun just ducking and weaving in between the bosses. Remember, this game is one-hit kill, so if I do take any damage, I'm pretty much screwed. I think that boss there also wasn't in the Master System version. It's just so weird that they changed it up so much. You can see part of the downside of the NES version is that you do lose that laser beam pretty quickly on. So I'm back here to the normal shot, and you can just see how much longer those bosses take. I could heavy bomb that boss, but it does barely any damage. And this boss here you have to beat in just a few cycles. You'll notice me starting from far away, and that's so that I can fire the bullet earlier and then sort of move in. So yeah, if you sort of have a look at these firing patterns, I'm trying to get the maximum number of bullets shot while the dude is vulnerable. And if you start from further away, that means you can shoot earlier on, and then as you gradually move closer, you can get in more bullet shots. Even though you're only shooting a bullet every 5 frames, you do get more shots in that way just by doing this moving far away and moving closer strategy. So we have Oppa Oppa's father here, and this bit of the boss fight goes pretty similarly to the Master System version here. I use a lot of heavy bombs to beat it, and that last heavy bomb actually killed a few of those snakes all at once, because the snakes respawn very, very quickly. We get the same epic ending message here as we did in the Master System version, and it's color-coded for our convenience as well. Just a couple more things while I'm on the NES Taz. It's worth mentioning that the level does not fade out until the boss, until all the objects are off screen. So you can see when I killed that last enemy, I needed to grab the coin before it would fade out to the boss. And that means that you don't want enemies flying around chasing you before you get to bosses. The other slightly unfortunate thing about this game is that it does run on a frame rule. Every 60 frames it checks if a level should end, so you can only save or lose time in increments of 1 second. It's basically the same as a frame rule in Super Mario Bros. 1, although that frame rule is 21 frames, not 60 frames. Unfortunately, that means that this Taz probably can't be improved too much unless you're able to save a whole second over a level somewhere. But the frame rule doesn't tick up in shops, so you can save bits and pieces of time in there. Alright, so now we're going to move on to talking about the Master System Taz, and there's a reason I'm talking about this one second, and that's because it has a very, very strange route. You can see me getting 1000 gold and then just immediately dying. And then we're going to wait on the title screen for a pretty long time. And it's not until about a minute later into the Taz that anything interesting happens. What we've been doing is cycling through the demos, and the demos play through the levels in order, and this demo is on the last level. The demo just moves right and shoots, but then it has random inputs. And I'm talking literally random, so every couple frames it just changes its direction, but it constantly auto-fires shoot and bomb, so you're constantly outputting damage here. Now, since it's a Taz, we can manipulate luck, and essentially I'm just manipulating the game so that I'm not dying, and eventually all the enemy bases get destroyed. Now, that was on the last level of the game, and then we just gain control when the boss fight starts, so we can just go and beat the boss as per normal, and then all of a sudden, we're essentially starting the run on the last level of the game. And this is called the demo glitch, sort of like demo desync RNG manipulation stuff. But basically what it lets us do is it lets us skip the entire game, essentially. Now, the downside of this is that we don't have as many upgrades as we would through normally playing the game. You don't actually get the money from playing that last level, so you're pretty limited into what you can get, and that's why I got that 1000 gold at the start of the run. But I got the wide beam and I got the twin bombs. There's a few different reasons for that. The wide beam's really good for dealing damage to multiple hitboxes at once, and then the twin bombs here is just that increased damage output. It's not so much that twin bombs are that much faster than single bombs for damage output, but what it allows me to do sometimes is kill enemies on one cycle rather than two. So the twin bombs let me kill them while they're vulnerable rather than waiting for them to go through their whole attack phase and become vulnerable again. Very useful stuff. And twin bombs they last forever, so they're really good to have here. Everything else I'd buy would either run out or be single use. So we're about to come into that last boss where the snakes chase you, and it's incredibly scary trying to do this on the upgrades I have. I'm back to the normal shot, and all I've got is twin bombs, so it's so hard to kill these without them killing you. But that last one there, we just barely make it. It looks like I had heaps of room, but if you let that get past you, it's just going to zip around and kill you pretty much straight away. So yeah, I needed that twin bombs to make that last boss work, but just that extra bit of damage output was the little bit I needed to do it. I wasn't even sure if it was possible to beat that last boss on such few upgrades, so I didn't know that until I really did the Taz and tried everything out. It's really lucky that this strategy at the start of the run to get 1000 gold works the way that it does, otherwise you'd be pretty screwed for upgrades, and you might even have to do the demo glitch a level earlier so that you could do level 7 and get a bunch of money for the boss rush. And I can't stress enough how tricky that RNG manipulation is for the demo. It's pretty easy to avoid dying, but it's very difficult to actually have the level done quickly. Oppa Oppa has a bias to traveling particular directions, so you want to sort of use that bias to your advantage, but even then it's hard to get them to go the actual way that you want. So I've got the inputs on the right here, and you'll just be able to see how absolutely insane they are. These inputs are set so you can't manipulate them, but you can see by doing many pauses I can sort of manipulate what's happening. Pauses and up presses and sort of different timing. Pause is the main thing that you can do, and I usually use those up presses on player 2 to like line up reference points for myself on where to pause. But essentially all that you really have access to is pausing, and if you pause at different times you get different effects. It usually depends on the number of pauses that you do, but I essentially want Oppa Oppa to keep going left as much as possible. So in theory this demo stuff could be optimized, but I remember doing a few different Tazes of the demo. Like I just start fresh and Taz the entire demo thing again with the manipulation and see if it got any quicker, and with a lot of trying this was about the best one I could get. And then you gain control here, so the run just continues as per normal, where you beat the boss. So if anything was going to be improved on this run, it would be this RNG manipulation with the pauses. But that being said, it's pretty difficult to get it at all, so I'm not sure whether that would be too possible. And we weren't even sure whether this demo desync glitch was possible when it happened. It was something that was posted on the forums years and years ago, but it was more like, oh, I wonder if this is possible, rather than this is possible. I will give a big shout out to Cool Kirby, who was the original one who made the demo glitch work all the way back in, well, 2015 was when that was posted, but they were talking about it all the way back to 2009. So I was definitely not the first one to make that demo glitch work, but I was the first to do it in a fully super duper optimized run. And that's going to be pretty much it for this video. So that's why I wanted to show the NES version and the Master System version, because both have such different tech, and the Master System version has the demo glitch. But both are definitely worth checking out, either if you're looking casually or in a speedrun. It's a really fun game and a really fun series. And that's going to be it. Thanks so much for watching.